We're now live on YouTube, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the meeting. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off, and will members try not to use them during the meeting. Councillors, when you want to speak on the agenda item, please use the blue hand facility in Zoom. Father Cross, would you like to lead us in prayers now, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
I hope everyone is as well as can be expected at the moment. I noticed something about mobile phones during the week, and actually my mobile phone has come in uniquely handy over lockdown for actually saying my prayers on through it. And usually I use a book, but when you never quite know where you're going to be, and usually that's not in church, it's been a little bit more precarious, but there we are. I know that at this time when we're all thinking about heading out of lockdown and heading out into the big wide world again, and thinking about new councils coming online, and those of you I know standing for election, and some of you are hanging up your responsibilities for good after this time. There's a lot of change going on, but perhaps you're holding your prayers as we do pray, particularly the Duke of Edinburgh and those who are suffering at the moment and who are first in our prayers. Almighty Father, as we gather to attend to the affairs of our borough and its communities, we ask for strength to leave aside our interests and seek the common good. As we live with the troubles of the past and the challenges of the future, grant us confidence and hope to seek holy wisdom and better paths. As we strive for those who are struggling and support those who are thriving against the odds, give us a sense of humility that our fears might never be realised, but our successes be things we never saw coming. Above all, grant us a love and sincere respect for our neighbours, whomever they may be, and whether their joys and sorrows are known to us or not, that we may serve well the people among whom we are set. All this we ask in the name of your most precious Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. Declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest?
Nobody's indicating, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. Apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Mary Markham.
Thank you. There has been a delay. The minutes of the last meeting will be brought into March. Apologies, Mary. Mayor's announcements. We've actually been doing things. Isn't it great? On Thursday, the 18th of February, Earl Charles Spencer was invested as a hereditary freeman of the borough, with thanks to Phil Ager, the chair of the Freeman Trustees. This took place for the first time in history, online over Zoom. You can watch a full investiture on the Mayor's Facebook page. This has been a long-term aim of the Freeman, and we are delighted to welcome him. It's the last Spencer since 1798 who's been made hereditary Freeman of the borough. On Sunday, the 31st of March, I will be holding my civic service, Charity Sunday, in honour of my charity, The Lowdown. We are planning for this to be both online and, if it is safe, welcome a small congregation. On Friday, the 26th of March, I'm hosting a live history talk about medieval kings and queens and the borough with Mike Ingram, local historian and author. Limited tickets of £20, including a hamper of delicious treats delivered to your door by generous people at Dapper Sandwich Company. Standard tickets are £10 and all proceeds go to my charity. Great. I invite each speaker to come up in turn and address the meeting for 3 minutes maximum. I call on the following members of the public to address full council. Firstly, Bob Purser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
I wish to refer to item 11, the KPMG Public Interest Report into loans to Northampton Town Football Club. The loss of over £12 million of Northampton taxpayers' money, not to include the cost of reclaiming the lost loan and the huge additional costs to the police and the CPS. One of the most serious abuses of local authority powers in recent years. Appendix 2 is all well and good for the future, but the KPMG Public Interest Report raises some very important questions, and the people of Northampton need to know that councillors have been held to account for their previous decisions. So I'm asking that the following questions from the KPMG report need answers. Does the Conservative group of councillors accept that they were negligent in not robustly challenging the loan to the football club? Does the then Cabinet accept that it was negligent in not knowing that it was agreeing to a £5 million non-repayable loan of taxpayers' money? Does the Cabinet accept that it was negligent in not calling in for review by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee the concerns raised by opposition members at the Cabinet meeting on the 17th of July 2013? And does the Cabinet member for Finance bear responsibility for the lack of scrutiny of the then Director of Finance over both the assessment of financial projections and the test of viability of the football club's financial position before the loan was made? And I'm asking also, will there be a personal apology from each responsible councillor to the people of Northampton? And will any councillors be debarred from standing for future public office? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Purser. We now welcome Kevin Simmons.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening. I've been a member of the Northampton Town Supporters Trust since 2015 and a board member since later that year. At that point, the club was facing a winding up petition, and the future of football in the town as a professional football league club was under serious threat. That the club had been put in that perilous position could so easily have been avoided. A number of trust members and other supporters have publicly raised questions about the financial shenanigans surrounding the loan and the associated redevelopment of the East Stand. Many had openly questioned the corporate construct behind county developments and First Land, and had been digging deeper into the affairs of the club's then owners and business associates. In that context, it beggars belief that this council conducted minimal due diligence. In the corporate world, we might call it the back of a fag packet. That said, the Trust wholeheartedly welcomes the KPMG report and the accompanying PIR. There are two key points to come out of it. Firstly, the past actions and the consequences of those actions, which regrettably has stained the club for potentially a generation and beyond. Even now, the first question most local people ask, and let's not forget this, they're taxpayers who may not be regular Cobblers supporters. And when they're talking about the Cobblers, it's when are we going to get that money back and when are the court cases going to happen? The Trust recognises that formal charges are yet to be brought by the CPS, but those criminal proceedings do need to happen and allowed to run their course. We are sure that the best but unlikely hope of recovering any of those £10.2 million will be through a consequent proceeds of crime sequestration, if indeed any of the money can be traced and assets seized. However, should any council or officer be implicated but not subject to court proceedings, then this council has a public duty to consider what alternative actions might be appropriate for the failings which the KPMG report has deemed to have been unlawful. Secondly, we're of the view that the PIR and its recommendations do not go far enough. The recommendation appears to single out loans as the sole subject of their commercial recommended protocols. But looking forward, commercial deals, and I
30
stress the word,
seconds remaining.
deals made in the name of the local taxpayer should be open to public scrutiny. At the very least, we should expect that all deals are open to competitive bid where practical to do so, and especially where we have commercial counterparties with deep local interest, be it, for example, sports club, bus companies or highways contractors. The events of 2013-15 should recognise that commercial confidentiality is not an excuse.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Can you wind up, sir?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
I do
you,
not
sir.
have adequate time to cover all the additional protections that we might suggest, but a repeat of this sorry affair must never be allowed to happen. Thank you.
I think we've all read your question, sir.
Thank you.
It did go on, and I knew you wouldn't get it in 2 minutes. So
I thought we had three.
apologise for that. No, you can't. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Members and public question time, item 6. The question has been received and is presented on the screen. The answer is to be taken as tabled unless a supplementary question is asked. The councillor who brings it up can be the one who asks a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask a supplementary. As the portfolio for regeneration and at that time, and your directorate was run by Stephen Boyce, who's not with us anymore, I am surprised that you are saying that you didn't know anything about the loan that went to Sixfields. You are a chartered surveyor, you run a business in the town, a well-respected business of selling and buying property. So I just wondered why you weren't informed or knew about this action and didn't do something to prevent it.
Thank you, Mayor. I think when you ask why I wasn't informed, you need to ask the person who didn't inform me.
But it's, excuse me, Mayor, it's the portfolio's job to know
Is this
what's
your
going on in its
supplementary?
portfolio. Yes, it's a supplementary. It's the portfolio's job to know what's going on in his portfolio. That is why he's being paid an allowance to do that. And it's all very well saying you didn't be informed by the then leader, but you should have made it your business to talk to your director and to find out what was going on.
I think I've already answered, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hadland. Cabinet member presentations. I call on cabinet members to give a brief interview of their respective portfolios. This will be limited to 3 minutes each. A period up of 45 minutes has been allowed for the whole items to be done. Councillor Jonathan Nunn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A brief summary from me, as well as working alongside other colleagues. I've referenced in my report, which I'm sure members have read, a little about COVID-19, and once again, what an excellent response from our own teams in what they've done here, and working jointly with other partners such as the Public Health, County Council, and NHS, and so on. Today, obviously, we've heard, you may have called it earlier in Parliament, the Prime Minister's roadmap to coming out of lockdown, and let's hope, with the excellent vaccine rollout this county is also delivering, that we see that happen as quickly as possible. Some progress on future Northants activity towards the unitary, which draws ever nearer, which I've referenced there. Can I draw members' attention to something? It's on the second page of my report. 2 further dates for sessions. We have had sort of, if you like, show and tell type sessions for legacy projects in Daventry and legacy projects in South Northants. Thank you to those members who came along. They're tremendously informative sessions. We are doing ours on the 25th of February and the 12th of March, 6 o'clock on the 25th of February, 12th of March, 2:30, we're going to be talking about the regeneration of our town. Tremendously important that the West embraces this and keeps the momentum up. And the second is more about the house building projects, temporary accommodation, homelessness, and so on. Really important that they understand these issues as well. If you're able to come along and support that, all members, please, we'd welcome that very much indeed. Similarly, can I just draw your attention to a regeneration update? Although we're talking about regeneration to the West, councillors, can I also point out we haven't done a regeneration NBC members update, which we'd like to go into more detail on for a little while. On the third page of my report, that says the 3rd of March. In fact, we realise now there's a clash with the West scrutiny, so we'd like to make that the 10th of March. Outlook appointment will follow, I think, from Tracy and her team. Other activities listed, like you, I was absolutely thrilled to be at Lord Spencer's Hereditary Freeman ceremony recently, Mr. Mayor, which was tremendous. This is likely to be our last formal meeting, or at least in the normal format. There may be something else that we will do slightly differently. So I've thrown in there at the end an opportunity. I'll mention it briefly, but please believe it's very sincere, to thank the Cabinet particularly for the way they've supported me, and we've worked together, the Chief Executive and the senior team, and all members of the staff, but also may I thank members of the opposition. I believe that we've achieved a lot in the last few years. Significant part of that has been as a result of a collaborative approach to solving our problems and so on. I think that's pretty much it, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to take questions, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Any questions?
Councillor Davenport's indicating, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Davenport?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hi.
I would like to find out why we're in the situation we're in, I've sent you copies of the emails with the Far Cotton Library, because the Friends of Far Cotton Library have been evicted and the bailiff's gone in, everything's gone out of the library and nobody told us. Now it's been sold on to the NHS, but I was told if that lease ever came up, if it was able to be leased again, it would go out there to different people, including us, for us to be able to take on that lease. We spoke with assets. So I just want to know, because you own, NBC own the building and it's just been taken from us. So please, can you help us to understand? And also the Section 106 money we asked for, we told wasn't there, was paid by the Lancaster Way development, a large amount, pre-occupation, Section 106.
Mr. Mayor, shall I respond?
Yes, Jonathan, carry on.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Davenport, Julie, I've seen some emails have gone about today and understand it was a subject discussion at the County Council meeting the other day. Look, obviously, libraries are the county councils. That said, we at the borough have always taken responsibility to try and help with anything that's good for our residents, as a result of which we've had dialogue with members such as Councillor Birch and so on, reference Kingsthorpe, St James Library. We talked to a couple of groups and now there seems to be a successful opportunity to run that. Wootton Parish Council, for example, who've taken over the running of ours. So we've done everything we can to assist. What I don't do is, on top of what we look after, then check what the County Council are up to. I'm slightly, if I may say so, I wonder if the phrase bailiffs is a slight artistic license there. We are here happy to facilitate in any way we can. We'd understood very little was happening at Far Cotton, and we hadn't specifically rung up to find out if flush out anybody who wanted to have a discussion. It may be a little late, but still happy to have some form of discussion. I'm not really sure we've much more to add, other than if we had had an active group banging on our door a little while ago, we would have done all we could, to help.
We couldn't get through to you because I never get response from emails. So we went to assets and we were doing fine with assets, what they were telling us, but everything went quiet. And so I'm sorry, I do think that the residents have been betrayed, and you can't just put it down to the residents that are trying to save it. That's not fair. It's very lucrative to sell that. I know how much it's gone for to the NHS, and they think it's all to do with money. I mean, did you discuss it with your own, Councillor Walker?
I've not made the decisions on this. I'm ever so sorry, but look, we would be there to help. But this is a county council matter, and to come to me in terms of having seen that I've received some emails that I've not fully digested from today. I don't fully understand what's happened, but it's quite hard to come to me at this time on a county council matter and say, well, what did I do to sort it? I have to say it's not been on my radar for a little while. We have had some fairly significant things to sort out at the borough, so that has been our focus. If there's further discussion to be had that you're not getting very far with the county council with, well, I'm happy to chip in, but at the same time, on the areas of our responsibility, we would not normally expect them to chip in and tell us what to be doing about our planning applications and various other things too.
Not planning application, it's your building, it's MB's building.
Yeah, I think if the county council stepped in and started telling us what to be doing about the services we're running, I'm not quite sure. If they offer to help on something, we might welcome their help. But as it happens, I don't think that that they necessarily think we're the people to go wading in now from the borough council and sort out something which seems to have reached some sort of conclusion. I'm happy to have a discussion with you this evening after this meeting, if you like, to better understand it. But I think it's rather late to come to something that seems to have concluded now and suggest that we, as not the responsible authority, should now have done something earlier. Don't think we've been in a position to do that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Councillor Meredith
any more
and Councillor
councillors?
Graham Walker are indicating to speak.
Councillor Walker
And Councillor Meredith.
and Meredith.
Yeah.
Walker first.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I knew nothing of this library business being emptied out until seeing the email today. Obviously, we knew that there was people asked to run the library to see if they could get a volunteer sector to run the library. And I do know that 2 or 3 people had put their hands up and said, yes, we could go forward with this. But I'd never heard anything else, whether there was going to be a group of people within the area to run the library. So, when you come in and say, well, did you speak to Councillor Walker about this? Well, no, it's quite unfair to say that because nothing had been said to anybody about this. And it's the first we've heard about it in Far Cotton that it had been emptied out. So
I didn't find out till last week.
Well, then that says it all, doesn't it? But at the end of the day, I knew as much as what you knew. All I'm saying is, I do know there was a group that was prepared to take on that library and it was never pursued. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we did.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Meredith.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Jonathan. I'm quite disappointed, Jonathan, that I sent you some emails in the past, and I sent you one quite recently asking you a question, and you don't seem to reply to emails. So, my question was, could you let me know, because Councillor Gareth raised a point about he didn't want the mayoralty to be funded, and my question to you at that time was, did Gareth claim to benefit the expenses for the mayor's allowances?
Yeah, all of them.
Because if he did, Jonathan, it's double standards.
Okay. Quick search of my email suggests the last communication we had looked to be back in November. I don't seem to have an outstanding email. I'm not sure if that's a question for me to answer, or indeed whether this is a session for questions to anybody you like. So it might be that there's somebody else who would want to answer that, but I'm not sure that that's the appropriate time to do it.
Surely, Jonathan, this is the new town council to sort out.
Yeah, I suspect it probably is. Yeah.
It's their gift now.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Councillor Emma Roberts.
Emma, Emma Roberts, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to follow up Julie's comments in respect of the library. I appreciate where Councillor Nunn's coming from in that it's a county issue, and I wasn't going to speak on it, but I think it's really prudent given that we've got a community council session this week where we're once again being faced with decisions that are being made by somebody without proper and clear communication with somebody else and with the relevant parties. So the community council hasn't been made aware of any interchanges in respect of the asset that everybody keeps selling to our residents is going to be their asset. They keep telling people that the Farcott Recreation Centre is going to be all for them and for them to do with what they want to do as long as they can agree that asset transfer with the West Northampton Unitary Authority. But actually, the borough is still going ahead, it would seem, and doing different things with pieces of that building without, again, informing those who are going to be concerned with it in the future. I just think it's a really important point to make that you're leaving these community councils open to problems, again, without communicating with the right people, and that's shameful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to reply to that, Jonathan?
No, I mean, I think the community councils are in a good position to do a number of things for their area, and I'm optimistic that indeed they will. I do think that this is an issue that's mainly driven by the county. I have no problem at all with helping. I just wonder if it's now being raised with me after the horse has bolted. But I would suggest, and I think it's well worth having some discussion with county colleagues before knowing what on earth to do next. Were there value in us discussing it tomorrow? We'd find an hour tomorrow to have a quick discussion and see what could be done. I don't know if there is value in that or not, or whether we've missed the chance. Perhaps what I'll do after this meeting is I'll chat with my colleague, Councillor Golby, and see if I understand the situation a little better. It just feels sad to be coming at this later stage where, despite being naturally remarkably busy, I think these libraries have been vitally important, and we've not shied away from any of these discussions around the others where we felt we've been able to help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll move on to Councillor Larratt.
Councillor Gareth Eales is indicating to speak.
Yeah, I feel I have to contribute, Mr. Mayor, being as I've just been quoted. It's unfortunate that Councillor Meredith is so misinformed. The meeting where we discussed allowances for the town council, I don't believe he attended. So quite how he could try and quote me verbatim when a meeting he wasn't even at is quite something. But for the record, I actually said quite the opposite. I actually said quite the opposite. What I said was I have no issue with the mayoralty being funded. I had no issue with that allowance whatsoever. What I simply said was any allowances should not be predetermined and they should be subject to an independent process. That's what I said. And if you disagree with that, I suggest you go back and watch the meeting again. But please, in future, I wouldn't ask the leader of the council to speak on my behalf, just I wouldn't speak on his behalf.
Thank you, Councillor. Nobody else? We'll move on to Councillor Larratt then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to present my report as published on pages 5 and 6 of the pack. I'd just like to say that the street lighting under street lighting, the street lights at St Crispin's have actually been connected apart from one, and that's a vast improvement to that area on a vitally important footpath that leads to the school. With regard to rail issues, I'm disappointed to hear that there's problems with East West Rail on their north-south link from the line between Bletchley and Bicester, linking down to Aylesbury, and that may well be delayed for several years due to engineering, technical difficulties in the vicinity of Aylesbury, but it's one that certainly going to keep an eye on. There's various flooding issues continuing, and I've highlighted one issue there, but the governance review is gone ahead and the councils are now up and running. We do have on Wednesday at 11 o'clock a meeting of the governance review task and finish group, and this will be looking at assets. And I have to say, Mr. Mayor, I've today, in the last 5 minutes before this council commenced, seen the report that's coming about the lease of the Guildhall to Northampton Town Council. And what is being proposed is certainly not what this council envisaged. I thought the whole idea was to preserve the assets and the civic assets and the Guildhall with the town council. And what is being proposed certainly doesn't do that. And I'm exceedingly disappointed that we've got the report that we've got, which doesn't go anywhere near to satisfying what I would like to see. And I hope that we can discuss that more fully. But we're also going to discuss assets more in general. I agree that it has always been the case that we want the freehold of the rec centre transferred to the new community council. I'm not aware in any way, shape or form of any deals that have been done on leasing out other parts of that building. I believe there may be issues going on behind the scenes, but nothing formal has happened. And, you know, I continue to make it clear that that building should transfer to the community council. Now, I do believe there's issues with regard to the library, and I know that I'm told that the books have been emptied out. I'm told that that is because it's an insurance issue, and where libraries are empty, books have to be shifted out. The county council portfolio holder tells me the library hasn't closed, and it's shut down because of COVID, like many others, but it certainly hasn't been closed, and the books have been moved out for insurance purposes. That's what I've been told. I can say no more than that, but that's where we are as far as I'm concerned. Like Councillor Nunn, I'd like to thank all our staff and officers for all their hard work over the years that I've been involved in this council as we move towards the end phase. And also, as the leader says, to all councillors, past and present, who it's been a pleasure to work with and to actually deliver for Northampton. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions?
We have Councillor Jane Birch, Councillor Emma Roberts, Councillor Brian Markham, and Councillor Julie Davenport.
Right. Shall I kick off?
Councillor Birch, far away.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Larratt, for your report. And I can just add to your comments about the Guildhall. I'm as outraged as you are. I do have a question on the electoral services, and I'd like to know, please, what information the electoral services are going to put out about the upcoming elections, because obviously everybody is slightly concerned about what may be a different arrangement. But anyway, we have a number of elections on the 6th of May, and I think that needs to be really clearly explained to our residents, and what these elections actually refer to. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Wish to come back on that, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I look forward to our meeting on Wednesday morning when we discuss this lease. And thank you for your comments on that, Jane. I think, as I say, we're both outraged about this. With regard to electoral services, it's still very much a moving feast. We've only had sort of one proposed, as far as I'm aware. We've had the government's decision to change the nomination procedure, in that we'll only require 2 signatures, a proposer and seconder, due to the fact they don't want us going around visiting people to collect signatures. So that's something that's happened. But I believe there's still other issues that are going to come out, and we've only today had the Minister's statement on moving towards the end of lockdown. So I mean, as soon as information does become available, I'm sure it will be communicated. But there is coming up, and I'm afraid I haven't got the date in front of me, a session for all likely candidates, people thinking of standing on the election process. And I would urge everybody to attend that, and then they will get the latest information that there is available. But it will certainly be an informative session for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Larratt, for the report. The first question I've got relates to flooding. It's referenced again, obviously, within your report, and we're in a position where we've still not had any of the watercourse report information that I've requested on a number of occasions. I feel like a bit of a broken record because I have banged on about that for months now. We've not received any of that info. I attended a really informative meeting with the Lead Local Flood Authority and the Environment Agency, who advised quite clearly that we could have been in a very significant flooding situation over the Christmas period had we not had the changes that were implemented back in '98, and that with the climate position as it is and the increase in rainfall, that there's a significant potential for us to end up in a similar situation. So the urgency of us having these proper flooding provisions and reports in place are really now, in my mind, even more important than they were before. So I'd really encourage Councillor Larratt, if he can, to do anything that he can do to get that information available to people before the borough ceases to exist, so that we don't lose the recommendations that were made for the borough within the West Northants Authority. We've got to make sure that's at the forefront of their mind. Secondly, I just wanted to talk very briefly about the asset meeting and the working group meeting again to discuss asset transfers. I can't make a meeting at Wednesday at 11 because I already have commitments, but I would strongly recommend that somebody from all the community councils and the councillors that are currently representing are there to enable them to take part in these discussions around asset transfers, because I appreciate that you're outraged with the information that you've been provided with today, but many of us have been outraged about the process for quite some time. And haven't felt that we've been au fait with what has been going on, and we really do need to have that information clear. So I would ask for an invitation perhaps to be extended, certainly from a Far Cotton and Delapre Community Council perspective, to one of the other councillors to be there. I appreciate, Councillor Larratt, that you have just joined the Far Cotton and Delapre Community Council, but I do think perhaps one of the sitting councillors for the ward, it would be a good idea if it was them. Obviously, I will leave it to them to decide whether they feel they need to push that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Do you wish to come back on that, Councillor Larratt?
Thank you, Councillor. With regard to the flood reports, as you know, the flood reports came in. I was pushing for them to be published. There was a reason we couldn't publish them, and that was because of the sensitivity about the costs of getting the work undertaken. Now, as far as I'm aware, that has been done, and I see no reason whatsoever, and I'm sure an officer will come back to me tomorrow and tell me we can't do it, but I will ask that tomorrow councillors be sent that report. It's an email report. It was emailed to me before the tenders were asked for the work. I understand that's progressed. So therefore, I don't know which officers are in this meeting, but if Kevin's in this meeting, Kevin, please can you email it to all councillors tomorrow? Thank you. On the question of assets, Councillor Walker is actually a member of the working group as well. So there will be two of us there. And believe me, I just find that this whole situation of asset transfer has not gone, particularly having heard the Guildhall today. I'm just totally devastated as to what, you know, when we say the old Guildhall, we mean the old Guildhall. We don't mean parts of it. And I just think it's, you know, what the West Northants want with the council chamber. What do they want with those upstairs rooms? What is it? What are they playing at? Because I dare say this has probably come from West Northants. I don't know, but I'm absolutely devastated, and I think that we need to make sure that these assets do transfer freehold or on an exceedingly long lease to the Town Council, to Delapre and Far Cotton Community Council, and to Kingsthorpe Parish Council. I just think it's as I say, I'm totally disappointed, really disappointed.
Councillor Davenport.
Mayor, was
you're next on the list.
Oh, I thought I was before.
Go on in, Councillor Markham.
Sorry, it's me, is it, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, far away.
Thank you. As Councillor, I'm a little confused now about this asset working group. Last week we had a meeting, and it's so many of the shadow different authorities, I'm sure it's last week, of the Shadow Town Council, we agreed the Shadow Town, or the executive of the Shadow Town Council would need a meeting after the asset group is meeting tomorrow. And have things changed so much? And when is Councillor Birch on that asset working group? Because I'm concerned. We were concerned. We had no information last week, and I do feel that the town council, the first reason to have the town council was to keep the Guildhall in public use, to keep the mayoralty, and as a centre of our town and our community. And if there are problems with it, but I'm just not quite sure what the process is now going forward, because we only have until just over a month until the town council's in force, and we're stuck with whatever we have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a meeting. We've had this working governance group, cross-party working group in place for over 2 years now, and it is a further meeting of the cross-party working group community governance review, and we will be discussing the muniments and lease and everything else of the Guildhall to be transferred or on lease to the town council from this council's perspective. And as I say, that is what the meeting is. It's a meeting of the cross-party working group community governance review, and we will no doubt communicate with the town and parish councils, or all of the parish councils, after that meeting. But as I say, a report came out this afternoon that Councillor Birch brought to my attention about 6 o'clock. I only managed to look at the report about just before this meeting, and I say I'm devastated, and I haven't spoken to any officer about it yet, but I think it's certainly something that we will have a big say on Wednesday at the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Matt.
Councillor Davenport.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Roberts has covered the flood, so that's good, because we'll get that report. I just wanted to ask, are you not aware of the latest email that Councillor Lizzie Bowen has actually said it is sold? It's gone, and apparently we agreed to it, which didn't happen. So that has changed 3 times now. And just as you feel devastated about the Guildhall, can you please understand how we in Far Cotton feel? Because that library represents so much to us. A lady who died of cancer, who was an amazing person at the Delapre Primary School, built that all up. She made sure we got the community centre and we got the library. She died not long afterwards. But to just take it from us, and it is your building. So someone must know that the lease has been sold. Thank you.
I thought we'd moved on from that, Councillor Davenport.
No, because Councillor Larratt brought it up again.
Councillor Larratt?
Mr. Mayor, I entirely concur. I mean, nobody has come back to me and said that we can't proceed with the transfer of Far Cotton Recreations Rec Centre on the basis that it's been sold or something's changed that prevents that from happening. Now, I don't see how it can be sold. I don't see how anything can be sold without the knowledge of this council. I'm dealing with the governance review. I'm trying to oversee the transfer of assets. And if something has happened and I've not been told, I fear I've been really let down badly. And that is totally unacceptable. I think that we've got to bottom this out on Wednesday, and we certainly will do everything we can. And I still have of the firm belief that this whole building goes to the community council. And if people are trying to stop that, then I think they're undemocratic and don't have the interests of the community at heart.
Thank you.
Councillor Eldred.
Mr. Mayor, we've got 3 further speakers. We have
Three more.
Councillor Penny Flavor, Councillor Graham Walker, and Councillor Sally Beardsworth.
Any flavour, Councillor? Councillor Flavel.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
Sorry. It's a quick question for Councillor Larratt about the lighting. I did mention it ages ago. To the lighting in St Giles Churchyard. As far as I can make out, every time I go by, there are no lights. There's one little light shining and nothing in the middle or on the edges. Now, as a lot of you may realise, this is a walkway that a lot of the nurses and the helpers at the hospital use, apart from office staff. And I wonder, Phil, if you could look into it, please, because it really is very dangerous. You may remember some time ago, about a year or more ago, somebody was found dead in there, and there's fighting quite often. So I feel it's really a dangerous situation if the lighting isn't sorted out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Flavel's raised this in the past. I understand that the lights in the churchyard have been all upgraded as part of the upgrade process. All the lights have an identification number on, and if they're not working, then there's a phone number as well for people to call and give the reference number so that they can be repaired. But what I will do, I will ask that officers have a look at the situation with the lights in the churchyard tomorrow when I speak to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, after hearing the other two local councillors and Councillor Larratt about the building, we was always led to believe that the building was coming to the parish. Obviously, being the chair, I've made inquiries whether we were going to get the toilets or whether we were going to get the playing field and nothing else, because the playing field is not fit for purpose, so we will never need that. Flooding is an issue there, which I think the council already know. But I have asked these questions and I've had no replies from NCAL or anywhere, you know, where I've asked these questions. What will we be taking over? And so we are all in the dark at the moment, and leaving us high and dry, I feel it's not the right way to go. So I would expect that we get some answers to our questions come Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been listening with trepidation to this debate about the county council is selling things off without informing people, and I'm really, really worried about the Guildhall. The Guildhall belongs to the people of Northampton. It doesn't belong to a council, it belongs to the people. I've always believed that, and it should always remain so that people can go around there. It's a historic building, it's got so much history attached to it. It's not fair that the county council is trying to give us only a part to run the town council. They should be realising how important it is for the people of Northampton. And I think we're being very shabbily treated by the cabinet on the unitary because they're doing very little to actually support the people of Northampton. And this is a real slap in the face for them. So I really feel as if this is the case, I'm really, really worried about the future of Northampton under this new unitary. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Beardsworth.
Councillor King's indicating to speak, and Councillor Jonathan Nunn.
Can I come back on that to the Councillor Beardsworth?
Yeah, of course you can, Phil.
Okay. Sal, I totally agree with Councillor Beardsworth on this one. She's absolutely right, and that's where we started from. The Guildhall belongs to the people of Northampton, and it should remain in the hands of the people of Northampton, not in the hands of the remote unitary. That's exactly what we said right at the very beginning. And to go to where we've gone to today, I find is totally unacceptable. So, you know, I'm totally behind that. But all I can say, Sally referred to the shadow unitary cabinet, as a member of that body, can I say that this issue and the issue of assets from in Northampton have not been discussed in any way, shape or form at any meeting of the shadow executive. Just want you to be aware of that.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just been looking at some clarification around this, because obviously the file covering the library is coming up a lot. So I've had a confirmation from George that the library part is actually leased to NCC, and what's going to happen with it is going to be turned into a maternity hub and children's library. The remainder of the building remains exactly as it is for communities, and it's not been sold.
Well, the lease has, yeah.
The lease was already there to NCC. So nothing else has been affected.
It's quite complex.
Yeah, well, this is the update I've just got, so I thought I'd get a bit of clarity. Apparently, you've all just been emailed as well. But if anyone wants to take this up, I'm more than happy to look into it, and we can all get together tomorrow.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Can I just come back and ask Councillor King to call me after this meeting, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
I'll call Councillor Eldred now to do his report.
Councillor Nunn's still indicating to speak.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Nunn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's only a very, very quick point because it's probably just to slightly challenge Councillor Beardsworth there, pointing a finger at the shadow executive. The issue of the Guildhall has been nowhere near any discussions with them. We clearly have received this evening a report that none of us seem to like. We've got a meeting next week. We'll straighten it out. I think it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eldred, present your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Third time lucky.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm pleased to present my report. It's been it's normally February. I'll get a chance to have my say about the financial side of things for the borough, and this is obviously going to be my last report for the Northampton Borough Council, which is it's a sad day really, because it's got a lot of history, and I've been proud to represent the council now for a number of years, and in the last few years as the cabinet member for finance. So just to give you a quick briefing on what my report has said, we've given out 7,100 grants to businesses over Northampton Borough, which is over £45 million of distributed grants. We've had we've obviously had the business rate relief to the tone of 34 million, which has helped out a number of our businesses in the town, which is really helpful for them, especially in the hospitality trade, who have really struggled over the last 12 months, and obviously every other business has, but them particularly have been the ones that have been hit probably the hardest as we go forward. On top of that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say thank you to Shelley Parker and the facilities team at the borough. They've been amazing keeping the building safe and secure for the staff, but not only the staff, but the residents of Northampton. So it gives people the opportunity, when we were allowed to let people in the building, they were safe and secure, and all the proper protective material was there for everybody. And last also, Mr. Mayor, obviously this could be the final chance I get to say this, is thanks Stuart McGregor, the 151 officer, and the finance team for everything they've done with me over the last few years to make sure we get the accounts up and straight, and to make sure that we're in a good financial position when we pass everything over to the new West Northampton Council. I just wanted to come back quickly on Mr. Purser, who's just left actually. I can't answer for the previous cabinet member for finance about what happened during the loan. I was on the cabinet, but on community safety, and we passed everything over to the leader, the chief executive, and the 151 officer at the time to make all them decisions. So I'm not going to be answering any questions on behalf of any of my colleagues or past colleagues of what happened with the loan, and I'm going to bypass that one. If they wish to contact them people, then that's entirely to them, but it's not for me to contribute towards that. So on that note, Mr. Mayor, again, thank you to all the staff at the Borough Council for all the support they've given me over the last few years on the financial side. And I look forward to any questions that anybody wants to find my way now.
Thank you, Councillor Eldred.
Councillor Sally Beardsworth is indicating to speak.
Sally Beardsworth.
You're on mute, Sally.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was pleased to hear that the relief we give to people that can't pay their council tax in full has dropped down to 20%. Liberal Democrats have championed this because obviously at this particular time, people are finding it really, really difficult to find money to cover bills. So to drop down to 20% rather than 35% is going to be a big help to them at this present in time. So I'm sure the portfolio holder is pleased that it's happened, and it's a shame we couldn't have done it before, but I understand these things are relevant to what we can afford to do. But I really feel that it's going to be a big help. So thank you for that. And thank you for making your statement as well about you were on the cabinet at the time of the 10 million, well, 12 million really. And 5 million of that was going to be non-repayable, which was something I didn't realise until late into the process. And yet you weren't informed by your leader or the chief executive on such a huge decision. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. So, I mean, I don't really want to comment at this time because obviously there's a police investigation going on as well at the moment. So I don't want to be obviously compromise that position. So we'll have to see what obviously the police bring out, and we can go from there, and hopefully, you know, things will get resolved as soon as possible with regards to that. I want to thank you as well, Sally, for helping me as well. We're on the we've done the discretionary fund. I think we've had a great team on there with yourself and Councillor Davenport. You know, we're not always agreed, but we've always come to a good conclusion at the end of it. So from that point of view as well, I want to thank yourself and Councillor Davenport and Councillor Hibbett have been involved in that for all the support you've given me as the chair of that area over the last few years. It's been really appreciated, and thank you for your support. And, you know, I mean, again, without that as well, we've actually brought in during the last few years is the instalment payments for council tax, which has helped people spread it over 12 months rather than 10. So again, that you can see with the collection rates we've been receiving, that has actually helped over the last 12 months. So it's given people a little bit extra money in their pockets and spread the cost over a longer period. So I'm pleased to see that, and I'm pleased that all of us have worked together on that on the hardship fund as well to make sure people have got what they need.
Yes, thank you for your time as well.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Nobody else is indicating, Mr. Mayor,
Thank you,
and there's just
Tracy.
under 2 minutes left for this item.
So, Councillor Hibbett, speak quickly.
Speak quickly. Thank you very much. My report is updated on the rough sleeper position, and I can report that 18 people have been accommodated under our version of the Everyone In initiative that runs until the 31st of March. I can say, to preempt a question, every effort is being made to move those 18 on into supported housing. I don't want anybody back on the streets, and neither do any of the officers. The SWEP has operated 6 times, 22 nights, and for all the arguments, you know, about people on the street and the severity of the weather, we've rarely had more than 6 in there, and in recent times only 1. Homelessness prevention figure is now reaching up to 700. I've talked about the impact on the temporary accommodation figures. The housing team enforcement is still active, and we've just secured our first interim management order. And I finish with the MPH response to COVID challenges. And as it's I'm hoping at the next meeting I get
30 seconds remaining
to say goodbye and thank you to everybody. So I'll leave it at that and take 20 seconds of questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hibbett. I think there was a lot of good news in that. I now invite Councillor Stone to make a statement on doing local better.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and
Evening,
colleagues. I couldn't have had a better introduction to this opposition business, could I, than the discussion that has preceded it around assets transfer. And really that is one of the points, isn't it? We're days away from the demise of the borough. And for me and for everybody on this call, I'm pretty sure it's a sad state of affairs, and it's a change none of us wanted, and one that everybody has expressed regret about. It's something forced on us. Nevertheless, we are duty bound to make the most of what we have and redouble our efforts for local people, and that's what I want to talk about. West Northants is going to dominate our lives, is going to make key decisions that impact on all of us, and will be providing all our essential services. So in this new context, it seems to me it's ever more important for us to think about localism, about how we can empower our communities, how we can bring decision-making closer home, and how we can make a real difference. The relationship between the town councils, the parishes and West Northants is going to be absolutely key to the future well-being of our citizens. I do not understand, and I don't believe for 1 minute, that West Northants can deliver any of its promises without the engagement of all those bodies and of our communities. I think we've got a huge task ahead. I'm not very encouraged. I haven't seen anywhere in the West Northants papers or on their committees or in their meetings a strategy being developed for them working with the parish councils and the town councils. And I find it really concerning that at this very late stage in the game, those conversations are only just beginning. We need to think about what we can do as a town, and I'm not just talking about elected members, but the voluntary sector, the residents, associations, our community organisations and our small businesses. What's going to be the mechanism or mechanisms by which we can have the influence for Northampton that we need to have? I think local democracy is the key, but this is much more than just asking people to vote every 4 years. Lucky for us, I would say, lots of people are thinking along the same lines, and so we have lots of support out there. For example, we have national organisations like Locality. Their vision statement says, we have a vision of a fair society where every community thrives and a mission to support organisations. And one of their key planks is called Keep It Local. And keeping it local is about turning the tide on large-scale outsourcing, music to my ears, and for services that truly transform, what they say is keep it local. We know the challenges facing local authorities are unprecedented, with budgets shrinking and demand rising. Many local authorities have sought savings through big outsourcing contracts, but what we have seen is incidences of scale fail. So it's not bigger the better, more local is the better. Lots and lots of local authorities have signed up to Keep It Local campaign. We should ask our town council to do that, and we should certainly ask our West Northants council to do that. We've also got a think tank called Centre for Welfare Reform that was formed in 2009 to help create a world where everyone can be an equal citizen. It's really worth us looking into that as well. There's an organisation called Do Something Good, sounds good, which has toolkits and advice about community engagement. So there's lots and lots of support out there. There is a concept called participatory budgeting. This is a process of democratic deliberation and decision-making in which ordinary people decide how to allocate part of a public budget. Support for this development can be found on the
30 seconds remaining.
Website. I would say that our experience of the volunteer response to COVID-19 has showed us that there's huge public appetite for engagement. And we know that the further away from people decisions are made, the less trust there is. So we need to keep it local. We need to build trust, and we need to be able to empower our communities. Keeping it local can be the rallying cry, it seems to me, for all our parishes and town councils. It needs to be the message we all take cross-party into the West Northants Authority to stop it becoming remote, to prevent the build-up of mistrust, to support our communities.
Thank you, Councillor.
To engage and become. Keep it local.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have to agree with a lot of what Councillor Stone has said, and it will certainly be a very sad day on the 31st of March when this council ceases to exist. This council that's worked since 1974 in the interest of the people and the residents of Northampton, delivering for them and working on their behalf. And you know, I just feel that it is, as I say, it is going to be a very sad day as we move to the larger council. But we've got to make sure that localism works within that council. And I totally agree that our communities need to be empowered and decision making needs to be at the lowest possible level. Hence the establishment of the town council, the parish councils. Who's better to manage assets and deliver for the local people than the local people themselves? So I'm fully supportive of that. And, you know, I think as far as the unitary goes, I mean, Councillor Stone said that she saw nothing about how the unitary is going to work with our parish councils. Well, I have to say that we've sort of addressed that in the Constitution, and we're looking to ensure that there is a good working relationship with parish councils, whether that be through the Clerks Forum that we've currently got in Northampton or similar forums that currently exist in Daventry and South Northants. So there is certainly an appetite for that, and I'm sure that will continue. I think, as Councillor Stone says, West Northants is a vast council, and it's going to have to work with the parishes and town councils if it's going to deliver on behalf of residents. But I think when you look at Northampton and in West Northamptonshire, Northampton clearly has a great many more members of West Northamptonshire than anywhere else. It may be difficult, but I think perhaps at times it may be that Northampton councillors make their view known as one, but we'll have to see how that progresses. Councillor Stone mentioned a lot of organisations that I'm not totally familiar with, but I'm sure there's a lot of good that they do and perhaps something worth looking at. She talked about the need to keep things local and not sign up to massive remote contracts and things like that. I agree, but then again, we've got to give the taxpayer value for money.
30 seconds remaining.
And I think you've only got to look at the success of the Veolia contract to see how well we've done. COVID has provided a number of volunteering opportunities, and I hope that those will continue. But I'm totally supportive, and we're totally supportive of localism and decision making at the lowest possible level. Let's make sure we get area committees within the new council that can have that local connection, and it's something that's actively under discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stone, you have 2 minutes to sum up.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Larratt. Good to be on the same page now and again, isn't it? I think one of the other points that I really want to emphasise on keeping it local is about how that feeds into our climate emergency work and helping to reduce the carbon imprint. I think that is really, really, really important. I think it's important as well in terms of how that will help regenerate the local economy. If we try and give local contracts and create local employment, that will help all of our communities become sustainable, won't it? I think we've got examples of really brilliant locality working. The neighbourhood forums are absolutely where it all happens for me. And I've got the experience of working in the Spring Boroughs Forum around that with local people to really, really good effect. I think it's going to be down to every single Northampton councillor. These things don't happen by accident. They have to be made to happen. And if we don't take it as our mission to make it happen, then it won't. So I think it's down to all Northampton councillors to go into the West Northants thinking, keep it local, keep it local, keep it local. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Item 9, carbon neutral Northampton strategy. Councillor Hallam is proposing this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to draw a comparison between 3 of the greatest Britons of all time and 3 of the most influential campaigners in our history, namely Emmeline Pankhurst, William Beveridge and David Attenborough. Emmeline Pankhurst, alongside other high-profile campaigners, had been campaigning for universal suffrage long before the First World War, the once-in-a-generation event forever associated with that period. And ultimately, after the war ended, her campaign achieved its goal. And it's deemed as one of the few positives that come out of such a tragic period in our history. William Beveridge finished his report on health and social care long before the Second World War ended, another tragic once-in-a-generation event. Ultimately, the end of the Second World War and the peace that followed accelerated the creation of the NHS. Again, another great positive in a time of so very few. And finally, when I think back to 2019, it was David Attenborough and other high-profile campaigners that were making the news headlines and brought the issue of climate change to the forefront. That is, of course, before COVID-19 came along and took its place at the top of the news headlines. Now, as the pandemic proceeds, I believe that climate change will return to the top of the news agenda. And the tragedy there'll be lots of tragedy associated with our once-in-a-generation event, the COVID-19 pandemic. And climate change and how we move forward for it will hopefully be seen as one of the very few positives that people look to from our once-in-a-generation event. Less traffic, hearing the bird song, record numbers out and about and spending time in Northampton's glorious parks and open spaces. Just a few of the opportunities that we can and should capitalise on, and there's lots of that thinking that's gone into this report. I think the report represents an excellent legacy, and it was this authority that set us on the road on our carbon neutral journey. And particularly thanks, and I know it's not done to thank officers necessarily, but it's so important. I thank Mr. Peter Bagley and Mrs. Ruth Austin and all of the officers that have contributed to this report, because actually it's not just kind of lead officers in our area. It's actually any officer of the council was more than welcome to submit suggestions, comments, or ideas to our forum and into this report, because that's how important we view climate change. That it's something that every officer should be involved in. Likewise with councillors too, as partner organisations, and also crucially here, members of the public. There's lots of expertise out there, and it was great to pull from that too. And what I think moving forward, Mr. Mayor, is that view, that sort of coming together of people is going to be crucial in achieving this goal. Now, the badge of the organisation that's championed this journey is going to change in a few weeks' time, but that really doesn't bother me at all, because actually it's about every individual, young or old, every business, large or small. In fact, it's about everyone. Everyone in Northampton and everyone in Northamptonshire can help us on this journey and will play their part as we move forward to become carbon neutral by 2030. Mr. Mayor, I'm really confident we're off to a great start, and I'm really confident that we'll look back in a few years and see this as one of the very few positives to come out of the negatives of the past few months. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to propose the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hallam. It's to be seconded by Councillor Kilby-Shaw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second this report. There's been an incredible amount of work gone in, and I'm assuming everyone's read it and can see that there's a massive amount of information about how we can put forward strategies. And to come back to what Councillor Stone said in her statement about local communities, although this current authority is coming to an end, there are going to be town councils and parishes coming out from it. And I think this is something that all those councils and authorities can use as sort of like a template, something that we'll be able to use and adapt to the new councils. And I know, as my position as the chair of the Shadow Kingsthorpe Council, I will be proposing something very similar to this in the coming months. And I think we can all get behind it and say that climate change is an important issue, and we've got a real opportunity. And even though, as Councillor Hallam has already said, there's been a lot of tragedy over the past year, one of the positives that's come out of it is that we've seen how we can adapt to changing situations, how we can work from home, how we can cut down on transport, and the positive changes are clear to see in the improved quality of air, in the improvement in our local environment. So I'd just like to say again, I'm very happy to second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers?
Yes, we have Councillor Zoe Smith and Councillor Paul Joyce.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Hallam said regarding how important it is that this has been created not just from people across the parties, but from people from lots of different organisations, lots of different community groups and the members of the public. This is something that people feel incredibly strongly about, and I feel incredibly strongly about, given that it's all of our futures on the line. I think there's been some really amazing work has come out in this document, really important work. I think what's really important now going forward, as we move forward into a new organisation, into a new authority, is to make sure that every single councillor here tonight takes personal responsibility for ensuring that this is carried forward into the new authority. So whatever committee you're on, whatever group you're in, wherever you are in the new council, that you're championing this, that we decided as Northampton Borough Council, and that you understand that it's one of the most important commitments that you can take on. So any of us who go forward into the new authority need to personally commit to that, continue championing it and making sure that this is, if we carry nothing else forward, that this is the cause that we carry forward and that each of us continues fighting for.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Joyce?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For the record, I would also like to thank Peter for his valuable input and compiling this report for tonight's meeting for final approval. And also, most importantly, the councillors, officers, local groups and activists whose ideas have contributed to this report. A clear green direction of travel and vision is set out within this document, and it will hopefully enable Northampton to be carbon neutral by 2030 and bring far-reaching benefits to all our residents to combat climate change. I'm also confident that additional work done by the Environmental Task and Finish Group will also supplement this report, ensuring that climate change is at the heart of every local policy and decision made in the next decade for our new authority. On the 3rd of June 2019, our council declared a climate emergency, which gained cross-party support. I hope and pray that the new authority will make it their #1 priority to do the same. Let's not forget, in April and September 2019, hundreds of young people attended climate marches in Northampton, calling for change and action. We must not let them down and future generations down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Hallam?
We've also got Councillor Markham, Councillor King and Councillor Nunn.
Right. Councillor Markham?
Thank you, Mayor, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the report refers to those very important policies passed way back in June 2019, when the climate emergency was the top of everyone's agenda. But of course, things have overtaken it locally, I suppose, and nationally in recent months. First of all, the reorganisation of local government, and secondly, the current COVID emergency, which we all hope and pray that will soon be over. But whether that's over or not, or settled or not, the biggest thing facing the whole country, the whole world, and every community here in Northampton and the local councils and the West Northants and the parishes and town councils is still going to be the issue that needs addressing over the next 5, 10, 15 years as we move forward, as everybody else has said. Slightly disappointed, therefore, and concerned, Mr. Mayor, that the new, I accept, I'm sure that the local parishes and the local town council will have this at the top of their agenda. However, I'm not so sure about the West Northants Unitary. As has been mentioned, Peter Bagley was the lead. He's a senior officer at this council. Senior cabinet member was also given the role of leading forward carbon reduction and the climate change emergency within this council. From what I see so far of West Northants, then the new members of the cabinet there have such huge remits. They have so many things within their portfolio on the executive there, and it's hardly mentioned as I can see it in the way the structure's set up. Also, there is no clear lead officer role, senior officer role within that huge authority which will do everything that's been described the way we worked through it on the Borough Council. Lots of officers coming together at a joint forum of officers and also members of the public and councillors at different times. I don't believe that's there. They probably had lots of other things on their mind, but as I said, this is the issue. They should be there. And more importantly, there's no money in this year's coming budget for climate emergency or climate change. So if we're looking at sustainable transport initiatives, if we're looking at greener housing, if we're looking at how the council will move to greener energy, if we're looking at cleaning up our air, if we're looking at simply planting more trees, there is no money in the West Northamptonshire budget for the foreseeable future. So I hope we all, if we continue on the West Northants, we remind them of that. I hope if we're on the town council, we plug there, but we certainly people from Northampton, all the councillors, when they join West Northants, have got to go out there and remind everyone there that the biggest issue facing all of us and the whole council, to be quite honest, is the climate change and the need to the carbon reduction strategy. Otherwise, they'll just fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back in 2019, when we agreed this motion, I was thinking, how on earth are we going to possibly achieve this? But here we are in 2021, despite the pandemic taking place. The officers, community groups, and everyone involved in our kind of 3.1.2 have achieved such amazing results. Just to clarify a few things that are going around about how we think going forward this is going to be taken, I'd just like to let people know Councillor Joyce, Councillor Hallam and myself have all been on the Environmental Task and Finish group. It's been taken extremely seriously. Councillor Adam Brown has been our chair and he's now shadow cabinet for climate change. So I feel that this report is going to be given its high respect that it deserves. And I'm looking forward to the future for working more on the climate change policies.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nunn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to quickly add, based on those couple of comments, I think Councillor King may have covered this to some extent, but I'm glad this came back to Council before the conclusion of NBC, because it is really important. And to have our approval, I sense universal approval of this, and that's great. So subject to that approval, it's great that it is, if you like, an adopted document for this council going into the West. But just to give some reassurances, yes, there is a responsible cabinet member, and I sense that things are being taken very, very seriously. At least 3 of the councils of the 4 have declared climate emergency, and I don't think we have a concern other than the fact that we all collectively need to keep pressing ahead to make sure that this remains a top priority and that we act. But if we can continue to act in the way that those involved, officers, members, and indeed other organisations and individuals outside of the council have worked in the last year or so to get this done, then I think we can really make some great progress. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hallam, right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to be brief because much has been said. For me, just to summarise, it really is about all of us, and it's about taking people that might not be there for the journey, making sure that we take everyone with us. And it's not necessarily up to an individual council or authority or an organisation. It's up to every single one of us. We all live here. We all, we work here. We've got our families here. We know other people that work here. It's really up to all of us to play our part, and I look forward to playing mine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Item 10, statement of licensing policy. Councillor Larritt to propose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to present this policy, new revised policy to the council for adoption. There's a requirement for us to review our statement of licensing policy every 5 years, and this is the end of the process of the latest review. This has to be in place and adopted by the 28th of February, because we must have an up-to-date policy, and we have been through a long and lengthy process coming up with this report tonight. The licensing committee considered the draft back in November last year, and we subsequently went out to consultation, and details of the consultees are within the report. But if I could just draw members' attention to paragraph 3.1.4 on page 42 of the pack, it clearly states there that the licensing committee on the 6th of February considered the report for approval and recommendation to this council. And the committee did in actual fact resolve, Mr. Mayor, to recommend agreed with no amendments that the policy be recommended for adoption by this council. So I'm asking, Mr. Mayor, that council adopt this policy that has been reviewed, been considered fully by licensing committee, and has had extensive consultation. Happy to propose, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. May I go back to carbon neutral? I didn't ask for a vote. Everybody seemed in great agreement. Can we have a vote on it?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed.
I thought you would. That's why I didn't ask.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
It's nice to see everybody united.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Favour to second the report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very pleased to second this report. It is lengthy. I think for a lot of people who are on the council but have never really considered the licensing committee is actually quite a complicated committee to sit on. There is so much to be looked at. Apart from the standard taxi drivers and private hire, we have pubs and clubs and all that sort of thing that we have to make a decision on. And the report is excellent, and I totally agree with Councillor Larritt. We should vote for this. I don't suppose you've read it all. I haven't read the whole thing. It's quite complicated, but it's worth reading. It tells you what the licensing committee are doing. Before I finish, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to say thank you I'm as chair of the committee, I would like to thank all the committee members who've been sitting with me. They turn up in the winter, whatever the weather, they come in just to listen to taxi drivers moaning that they haven't got this, they haven't got that. The whole committee are just wonderful. I would just like also to thank, if I may, because this is the last time I'll be doing it, all the officers who've written the reports. They must have sat down, well, I know they've sat down for ages to actually write the reports that we have. And I, for one, I'm very sad not to be on the licensing committee after the 31st. And I'm just hoping, and I have raised this, I must admit, with the new leader of the West Northants, that I hope that whoever is preparing anybody for the future of a licensing committee, because there will only be one, that will take in all three, Daventry, South Northants and us. And I sincerely hope they're considering it, because whoever is doing it is not going to have an easy job. Sorry, I've rambled on a bit, not usually my style. As you know, I don't usually say very much, but just to say, I think this is a report that we should be voting for. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Penny. I thought you put that very concisely. Any speakers?
Councillor Sally Beardsworth and Councillor Brian Markham.
Councillor Beardsworth.
Just get unmuted, Chair. Thank you very much. I've been on the licensing committee longer than I wish to remember, but it's been always a very, very productive committee. It's cross-party, but we don't take politics to the table. It's done in a fair and proper manner, which it should be done. And also, I want to thank the officers for a tremendously good report, because it's very, very clear and easy for people to understand. You read through the various sections, there's a lot of it, but you read through the various sections, it's quite clear to understand. And that's important because it deals a lot with the general public, and they need to understand these things as well. Thank Penny for chairing the meeting, and for all my colleagues on the licensing committee. I've always enjoyed that committee. I've always found it immensely interesting, and you see all sorts of people, all walks of life, and it's really wonderful. I shall miss the officers. They've done a wonderful job throughout the years, and I can't say any more in praise of what they do. It's a tremendously difficult, complex job, and they do it really well. So thank you to all the officers who took part in doing it and looking after us on the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Brian Markham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not so much a comment, it was a question for Councillor Flavel, but because maybe I'm wrong, did I misunderstand her when she said with the new West Northampton there will be one licensing committee? Councillor Stone and other people commented on her debate about making it local. Surely, we don't a taxi license application, but certainly opening hours application in Northampton surely won't be decided by a councillor from Brackley or something. Is that right? There will only be one licensing committee, and we should put a massive strain on members of that committee for a start. But it's make it local. That's what Councillor Stone said, and I hope that they do make it local.
Yes, and I have to say that is, I suppose, what I was trying to put forward. The decision will not be ours, the people who are sitting here this evening, and I am really quite concerned about how it's going to be organised. I don't know at the moment, I don't know whether Councillor Larratt knows, I don't know at the moment exactly how many people there'll be on the committee, but I am very concerned about how, you're right, somebody who is from, and I realise we have legal levels that we have to go to, but I cannot understand how somebody from Brackley, for instance, who have their problems connected with Milton Keynes, how they're going to understand taxi drivers or private hire in Northampton. I'm concerned about it. It's not my decision. It's somebody else's. And I've just made that point at a meeting of the West Northampton Committee. I have made that point. There's nothing we can do, I don't think, unless Phil has got more information than I have.
We'll soon find out. Yeah. Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first of all echo the thanks of Councillor Flavel and Councillor Beardsworth. We have been supported admirably by officers on licensing, and I too would like to express my thanks for all that they've done for us. Just on that final point that Councillor Markham makes, I'm sure people in Brackley wouldn't really want people in Northampton making licensing decisions in Brackley, but there we are. As a unitary authority, we will be required to have a licensing regime and a licensing policy that is common throughout the area of the council. So we will have a licensing policy that encompasses Daventry, South Northants and Northampton. On that basis, it is proposed that there will only be one licensing committee. I think you will find that the work of licensing in Daventry and South Northants relative to that in Northampton is significantly lower. But yes, there'll be one policy for West Northamptonshire, one regime, and it will be operated as such under one licensing committee, and that's the way it is. Whereas planning is slightly different, particularly at the beginning, whereas you've got 3 local plans. You can't have one planning committee interpreting and applying 3 local plans. So there will initially be 3 planning committees covering the areas of each local plan. But once we've gone through the core strategy, refresh and renewal, and we end up, and once we've got one local plan for West Northamptonshire, then there may only be one planning committee for West Northamptonshire, although I think there may well be 2, but we can't predict that at this moment in time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend the report and the.
Mr. Mayor, could I suggest that we perhaps move to the vote on this? I'm sure people will probably actually get home. It's a very good policy, and we should be voting for it.
Agreed.
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 Wonderful. Thank you.
Anybody against?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed.
Item 11, reports in the public interest regarding the council loan to Northampton Town Football Club and action plan in response. I call on Councillor Nunn to propose the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an extremely important report. The granting of this loan some years ago was done in a woeful and badly disappointing way. It's a long-awaited report, due in part because of the similarity with the work KPMG had to do alongside the police work, and they were asked for some period of time to suspend their work whilst the police investigation had to reach a certain point. So we now have the report. Many of these things are not new to us, but they are absolutely vitally important. When I joined the Cabinet in 2016, the inadequacy of the activities and decisions taken around the loan in 2013, the decision-making, the processes and so on, had already started to become clear. In December 2016, we then had internal auditors report from our internal auditors at that time, PwC. It was clear, having only been in this job for a month or so, that an apology was due, and I took it on my shoulders to be the person as the leader of the council at that time to make that apology. I again reiterate that apology to the residents and businesses of Northampton for the poor way in which this was done. When the loan was not repaid, the processes that should normally have brought security and peace of mind and protected public funds were lacking, and they were not adequate to protect the public purse. This report makes that quite clear. It is a sorry state of affairs, I think was the phrase that Mr. Kevin used a little, Mr. Kevin Simons used earlier, and I'd go along with that. We have had for some time, and particularly it was formalised in 2016 when PwC, the auditors, reported more specifically on their findings. It resulted in a thing called a governance action plan. From that, a significant amount of action has taken place. There may be more to do. I'll come back to what we're doing following this report. But just to provide, if I may, some sort of reassurance, because it would have been wrong to sit on our hands for 4.5 years and do nothing awaiting this report, but that has not been the case. Significant number of actions that have taken place. For example, obviously decision making is criticised quite rightly in the report here, and around what cabinet members did and didn't know. Part of our governance now is all cabinet members are briefed on every cabinet report, not just their own area, but across every area. During the drafting of the report, they get opportunity to see a draft report. They get opportunities to ask questions, to conduct separate meetings with officers on any aspect of it. No cabinet member arrives at a cabinet meeting not being fully aware, with every opportunity of challenging any part of the decision that they may be asked to make around that issue. Business cases are done incredibly strongly on so many things, be there be issues internally where we have to create our own business case, or be there external things. For example, members will be aware that a little while ago there was a discussion around a further loan to the Saints Rugby Club. who have proven on a previous loan to pay in a perfectly correct and fulfilled their obligations on a previous council loan well. All of the consideration was done on that. The auditors felt happy with the governance. As it happened, the Saints then didn't need to take up the facility, but what that did give us is an opportunity to test that we can get it right when we want to, and we now have those processes in place. There's criticism of rushing. We don't rush things anymore. We don't hang about. We do them as swiftly as we can to get something going. But nevertheless, if in doubt, we wait. We've done that on a number of occasions and postponed perhaps the cabinet meeting that a decision may come to ensure that we absolutely get it right. Delegations are adhered to and they're not exceeded. That was another key point of this, that delegations had been exceeded. They are no longer. I think even you might think, I would hope that those that come along feel our cabinet meetings are done in a different way now. There is opportunity for speakers. We do allow speakers to come back if they have further supplementary points to make, ask questions, and we have a fuller discussion. And in fact, our wider culture, my hope is and my belief is that our wider culture is one in which we listen to people's concerns, be that staff who are uncomfortable with something that's happening. You may be aware we have a formal whistleblowing facility for those staff that want to do that through another function and feel uncomfortable. But I believe we've created a culture in which people will speak up if they're unhappy about something that they see happening. Competitive processes are always mentioned, and again, I think our speaker, Mr. Simons, mentioned competitive processes. That's what we do now. So good governance has been, therefore, a preoccupation for the last 4 years plus. And what I mean by that is a daily thing on our minds. This is not just something we talk about for a few minutes, occasionally at a full council meeting when an auditor's report crops up. This is a day in, day out preoccupation. We have a new governance and risk manager, not new, but we created a new post part of the government action plan of a governance and risk manager, a very important person who we listen to very carefully and who walks the corridors with some power at NBC, and I'm grateful for the work that she does. So there are a significant number of things that have changed. But of course, despite what we have done, good governance is a journey, and it's a continual journey, and you must seek for continual improvements. And this report will be valuable in that. As part of this, we need to create an action plan, particularly to analyse any further things that have not been done. And I give the assurance that no point raised in this KPMG report will be overlooked or ignored or not taken 100% seriously. That report obviously would normally, that will also go to the Cabinet on the 24th of March. But in addition to that, obviously it would normally come back to a full council meeting as we're going to unitary. West Northants Council, of course, are responsible for, if you like, continuing an action plan and responsible for ensuring that the good practice that's highlighted in this report continues. So the action plan and everything that follows from this report is being drafted in conjunction with West Northants Council and will continue beyond. So this is not wasted simply with another month or two left of Northampton Borough Council. This will continue into the West. I would therefore like to guide members' attention to the recommendations, which are that we accept this report. Conservatives group, we will wholeheartedly, with no hesitation, be supporting this report, and I hope it's acceptable to members of the opposition party too. We note the draft action plan at Appendix 2. We also note the draft action plan includes a response to each of the auditor's recommendation, and the council requests that Cabinet receives a report on the 24th of March, as I've just said. Future reports will be dealt with through West Northants' governance arrangement. The council commits to a regular and open dialogue with the external auditors, past and present, and also that any resolved actions, of course, as at the 31st of March this year, will be progressed by West Northants Council as it seems fit. I would therefore commend the report and the recommendations to the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hadland to second.
You're on mute, Tim.
Pleased to second, Mr. Mayor, and reserve my right to speak. Unmuted.
Thank you. Are there any speakers?
Yes, there are. There's Councillor Sally Beardsworth, Councillor Danielle Stone, Councillor Jane Birch, and Councillor Les Marriott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are you ready for me?
Thank you. Yeah, far away.
Thank you. This is a terribly sad occasion for this council to have this report on the agenda tonight. Something that we should be finishing our time at the Borough Council with, something that we should be proud of, not something that we've all seen that's been a terrible, terrible decision that's been made in the past. I am very worried. The length of time that the police have taken and the Crown Prosecution Service have taken to get any criminal activities from this. But also, I am also very, very concerned that the people that were portfolios on the council at that time knew so little about what they were doing that they allowed this to happen. And I'm afraid I do find them culpable. I find them culpable because they were taking an allowance to do a job. I've been a portfolio myself, and I do understand the ins and outs and the amount of time it takes to be a portfolio holder and to find out what's going on in your portfolio to make sure that you keep your finger on the pulse. And we find that it mentions that the things were delegated to the portfolio for planning and regeneration. Stephen Boyce. He was the director working under Councillor Tim Hadland. I cannot believe that anybody with his experience and knowledge is saying to me tonight that he knew nothing about it, he wasn't told. But it was his job to find out what was happening in his portfolio. This is an absolute disgrace. We are living in a democracy, and yet this was awarded almost as a dictatorship by one person pushing this through purely to further his own career. And I'm really, really saddened because we actually, when the 4 years previous to this, we had the people come to us as Liberal Democrats from the Renish, and we said, no, it wasn't viable. We weren't interested, go away. You've only got 4,500 members, you seat 7,000, you don't really need an East Stand. And we got pilloried by that in the press through the Conservatives. But then, as soon as he came into power, he went off and did this absolutely ridiculous deal where 5 million of it wasn't going to be paid back at all. This is taxpayers' money, and it's absolutely a disgrace. I feel sorry for Jonathan Nunn and all the members of the cabinet that weren't on the cabinet at that time. But I do find the rest of them culpable in this action. And I think they should put their hands up and actually admit that they weren't doing their job properly. They weren't asking the right questions. And I think this is an absolute disgrace for this council. And as I say, I have my sympathies are with the leader and deputy leader now. They weren't privy to it, and they have apologised for something they haven't done. But basically, this has to go further. We cannot let councillors get away with things like this, because it reflects badly on all of us who try to do a good job for the people out there. And I really feel that we need to actually make sure this never, ever happens again. And I don't know how we can repay the people of Northampton for the loss of all that money, which could have been put to so much better use. £12 million, what we could have achieved with that, what help we could have given the voluntary sector, what things we could have done to promote the town centre, all those things. But as I say, Chair, Mayor, it's a sad day that we have to end on this note. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much. It is really sad, and I'm absolutely furious about it all, actually. The level of duplicity involved in all of this is absolutely extraordinary. And I think we have to be clear that there are huge consequences. We are being abolished partly because of the failings of that particular administration. And this is a legacy that's going to haunt the people of Northampton for many, many, many years. And I think we need to be a lot more honest about the scale of what we've lost. It wasn't £10.25 million. It was £10.25 million plus £2 million interest, plus £2 million spent on removal of the Athletics Trust, plus over £2 million in terms of audit fees and recovery costs, plus millions of uncosted hours put in by officers, not to mention members. So the total cost comes to well over £16 million plus officer time. So in my estimate, that would be well over £17 million. That is £17 million the people of this town are never going to see, that we could have benefited from that kind of investment. It's an absolute disgrace. And when you consider that our revenue budget is within the region of 28 million to 30 million pounds, 17 million pound loss on this deal is just absolutely extraordinary. And the legacy isn't just going to be borne by the people of Northampton. Now, because of reorganisation, it's going to be borne actually by the whole of West Northampton's population, because the interest rates are still going to be paid and the deficits built up around all of this have still got to be paid off. The report took such a huge long time to come to us tonight because of all the missing bits of paper, you know, that nothing was properly recorded, nothing was properly supervised. This should have gone to scrutiny. That is absolutely clear. So why didn't it? What was going on in that administration when there were cabinet meetings that lasted 3 minutes? 3 minutes. The cabinet members were not asking questions. They were not challenging what was going on. They allowed their cabinet meetings to last sometimes for 3 minutes. That was absolutely outrageous. And I fully take on board all the points made under 3.15 that the leader has listed in terms of putting in place proper governance procedures. And I totally and absolutely appreciate that. And I've been on audit committee and I've heard it and I've seen it and I applaud it. Absolutely the right thing to do. It is not going to help us come to terms with what is going on, with what went on, and it's not going to help us in terms of what is the restitution. You know, we've had a huge consequence for the borough. We're being abolished. That is a huge consequence. But what is the consequence for those people who allowed it to happen? What is the consequence for the people who made it happen? We need to see consequences in line of all of that as well. Absolutely unbelievable. 17 million pounds gone just like that, and for no benefit at all to anybody in our town. The KPMG report is astonishing. Fancy being able to gift £5 million to your friends like that, to even think about it, to have a loan where there was no additional interest put on to cover our own costs. So we were giving a loan and we were paying for it. How could people even think of doing that? Absolutely extraordinary. I'm really, really sad this has happened, but I'm also really, really angry. And on behalf of all our residents, I'm really, really angry. And I think there should be consequences. It's a shame that the police case is taking so long, but I understand that the first court cases are ready to go to court very soon. So we wait and see what happens there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, yes, it is. People have talked about this being sad. It is certainly very sad that this report comes towards the end of one of the last meetings of the Borough Council. This ill-advised and badly managed £10.25 million loan to Sixfields has dogged the last days of this council and has caused immeasurable reputational damage to the council. The real cost, as Councillor Stone has just said, is closer to 16 or 17 million pounds. Now, just imagine what that could do, what it could provide for the citizens of Northampton. It could build 160 council houses for families. It could begin to implement the brilliant carbon neutral strategy that we've just received. We could install energy saving measures in all our council buildings, LED lighting, reduce demand and use of water, generate wind and solar energy from all our council properties. It could establish safe walking and cycle routes and plant trees and manage woodlands. £30,000 could build the Mugger at St Edmunds, and £1.5 million could put 2 3G football pitches on the racecourse. We could enhance and support youth facilities. We could support the voluntary sector in providing much needed mental health and wellbeing activities for all ages. The list goes on. Sadly, the residents of Northampton will not benefit from this money in these ways. I mean, my question is, how was it allowed to happen? Was it ambition? Was it greed? Was it negligence? Was it collusion? It was clearly incompetence and bullying by those in power who stifled any concerns raised by officers or the opposition. Now, how are we going to prevent it from ever happening again? You know, lessons must be learned as we move into the new unitary authority. There has to be an independent chair of audit. There has to be an opposition chair of financial overview and scrutiny. And officers and members must feel empowered and supported to challenge decisions, ask the awkward questions, and hold our decision makers to account. And we have to work very hard to restore the trust and confidence in our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't try not to go over the ground that other councillors already gone over, but in my time as being a councillor, I've also been a portfolio holder, the actual initial one for finance. I've also been the chair of overview and scrutiny, so I've got experience when it comes to looking at these matters from both sides of for the cabinet structure and also from scrutiny. This report, I've read a number of audit reports, but my goodness, besides the county council report in recent times, this really caps it all, doesn't it? And what it does, it just completely blows the myth that the Conservatives, the Tories, can actually manage the public purse. They always recommend that they can. They say they do it better than anyone else, but this really blows that wide open. One thing that we have done, and I know myself and Councillor Stone have done, particularly on the audit side, is actually looked at the recommendations that have been up to date from PwC. So that's something that obviously we recognise as work been going on, and we also obviously support the recommendations in this report. But two areas I'd like to focus on, and that's one obviously from my experiences, one on the cabinet. Now, one thing, I heard Councillor Hale did say, look, I wasn't a part of that sort of portfolio. It was passed over to the officers to deal with and the leader. Well, I'll be honest with you, when you're on a cabinet, there's a collective responsibility, and whether or not the training and the advice is there now, that should have been there in the past. Councillor Beard has touched on it as a cabinet member, and I as a cabinet member, we knew what our collective responsibilities were. We made sure we read all the reports, not just of our own. So that's one area I am concerned about. You can't just wash it away, the fact it wasn't your portfolio. You should have been dealing with it at that time. The other area I looked at as well, and I can't believe this when it comes to scrutiny. The Scrutiny Committee has its own rights to actually call items in. I can't believe that scrutiny should sit back and expect somebody to pass particularly a report on such a key financial decision over to them. We had a situation where we got the whole of the Conservative group chairing committees, chairing over scrutiny, and obviously dominating all the committees. So really, that's an area where that key decision, it wasn't down necessarily to the cabinet or anyone else, it was down to that grouping. And why is that? Well, it was a culture at the time, wasn't it? When you look back at the culture within the authority, from the leadership of the authority. If you've ever been to a cabinet meeting at that time, and Daniel Stone was quite right, 2 or 3 minutes of them lasted for. I've been at some of those meetings where the leader of the council treated opposition members with contempt, not just there, but on occasions elsewhere. It's actually not just on this item, it's that culture that was there. And it was really not acceptable. And that is down to everybody in the ruling group, not just the cabinet members, the whole of the group. And particularly this item, every Conservative member at that time should take responsibility. It was in your manifesto in 2011, and it was that manifesto that was followed through. So why on earth councillors elected as Conservative councillors, let that drift, did not take any notice of it. It was one of your prime objectives in the manifesto to support the club and make sure this happened. So yeah, disappointing. One of the last times was sadly at the death throes of this council, and we leave with a sad note. But I say, I will support Councillor Nunn and thank him initially for obviously having to take on the role and get this through. But we do support the recommendations, the extra recommendations of this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Councillor Julie Davenport.
Councillor Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just obviously echo everything that everyone said. But when I read the report, my concern was for the officers involved, because it looked to me, I could be wrong, that they were being made the culpable ones, whereas to me it was supposed to be a democracy. People elect us to make decisions, they don't elect the officers to. And although I realise they have their legal duties, I still think, well, it concerns me, and I'd like to be told that that isn't the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Anybody else?
Nobody else
Councillor
appears
Nunn?
to be indicating.
Councillor
Yeah, sorry,
Nunn?
I think I saw Councillor Hadland signalling there, but he was putting his physical hands up rather than his electronic.
Righto. So you, Councillor Hadland.
You're on mute, Councillor Hadland.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. The
That's all right.
Let me down for a moment. There's no getting away from the awfulness of this saga, and we've now had what, 8 years to pick it over. As a member of the cabinet, I think, in common with all my colleagues, we must take full responsibility for allowing delegations to take place as they did. And there's no getting away from that. Councillor Beardsworth has kindly singled me out for blame. And she will know that going back over the history of the football club, when I was briefly leader of the council, I was vilified, pilloried, and if you look on social media, as I did once and vowed never again, subjected to some really unconscionable threats and insults, not only for me, but also for my family, by people purporting to be supporters of football. So after that, I have studiously avoided anything to do with football or the football club personally, because I wasn't going to subject my family to that sort of thing. So I went along with the delegation that we all did, and we know how that ended up. Can I just take issue with Councillor Stone? This deal is not the reason that Northampton Borough Council is ceasing to exist. The reason for that is that the County Council failed, and our aspiration to become either whole or part of a unitary council has come to the fore. So it was an ambition, not a punishment. Can I finally, Mayor, just pay tribute to someone who was dropped in it and then worked very hard for the town, and that is Councillor Mary Markham. You'll remember that when this deal was going wrong, she was, not through her own choice, the leader of the council, and she fought really hard to ensure that league football stayed in Northampton and prospered for the whole of the town. And that was a particularly bruising experience for anyone who was involved in the negotiations in the disposal of the football club and ensuring that football continued in Northampton. So I wouldn't want this occasion to pass without paying tribute to all the work that she did to see us come out of the other end. But I'm content to second all these recommendations. I think anyone who has anything to do with this will be saying never again, and I would echo that. So happy to second the recommendations, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nunn, right to reply.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I actually thank Councillor Haddon for raising a tribute to Mary Markham, who the original explosion seemed to go off in her hands and she was badly scarred by the shrapnel. My job became more of the clean-up man afterwards, but what a tremendous job Mary did. Can I thank also all the councillors who've made comments this evening and of course previously, and let me assure you that pretty much I mostly agree with everything you say. There may be some things that I'd pick up there, but I'm not going to, and the reason I'm not going to is because if there is any risk that my earlier apology seems incomplete or insincere, I'm not going to risk that. I'll just thank you for your comments. And please be assured that insofar the remaining days of this council, or indeed what we've tried to do in the last 4 years, we have genuinely tried to change both the processes and the culture to a situation where we do things right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I therefore, once again, would ask the council to support the recommendations. Thank you.
I shall call for a vote on the report. Everybody in agreement?
Agreed.
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 Anybody disagreeing? No? We'll move on to item 12. Noted a motion. Jonathan to propose a motion, and I call on Councillor Bearsworth to second the motion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Delighted to be proposing this, and I'm really delighted. It's a cross-party thing. I think we suddenly, at a last minute, rushed to get something in to express these thanks, and I'm tremendously glad that both Councillor Bearsworth will be proposing it, and I've little doubt that Councillor Stone will chip in comments too. So if we may, let's consider this a three-way cross-party motion. Really, the motion is this council recognises the work of both Northampton people during the pandemic, our staff, perhaps especially at all levels across the Borough Council, from the Chief Executive throughout the ranks, as well as the countless voluntary groups, the selfless emergency services, and all those who have gone the extra mile, putting others before themselves during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'd like to come together as a council and formally give thanks on the public record. It's been such a difficult year for the council. It's been the last year. I somehow feel, although actually it's been the finest hour of the council with everything that we've had to contend with. The people we've seen, whether they're keeping regular services going or doing some of the extraordinary stuff that's been required during COVID, have done the most fantastic job. I've been incredibly proud to, in some small way, be associated with that. I really have. And in terms of the response of the population of Northampton, where people have worked hard to follow precautions, our case rates have been high, we've worked hard to bring them down. None of that would have been possible without the individual actions following the guidance which the general public have done. So in proposing this motion, we seek to celebrate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bearsworth.
Thank you. Thank you. This is something I'm very pleased to do, Chair, Mayor. I'm really pleased. One thing I've learnt during this pandemic is that if people come together, amazing things can happen. When we show an act of kindness to someone, it will never be forgotten and often changes a person's life. I'm so proud of the staff, still delivering good services and helping people with information, guidance, that sort of thing, telling them how to find food banks, volunteer sections, and all the other bits that people need. Going for my vaccination the other week, I marvelled at the organisation at the medical centre. So many people there giving their time freely to help others. It really gladdened my heart to go there and see so many young people there taking our names, getting us to go into lines, getting our jabs, making sure we were all right afterwards. It was a wonderful experience. Maybe we were able to learn from these lessons from the pandemic And I think one lesson I have learned is that family, friends and co-workers are to be valued more than anything. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sally. Any speakers, Tracy?
Councillor Dennis Meredith, and I think Councillor Stone has got a hand up as well.
I think I'll take Councillor Stone first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Jonathan, for bringing this motion and making it a cross-party one. It is really, really important that we celebrate the work of our staff and our communities and our key workers. It is extraordinary when you think about how quickly and how swiftly and how nimbly our staff had to deal with evacuating the building and getting people set up to work from home. It was a torment for them, wasn't it? IT, you know, making all the arrangements. It wasn't on their radar. They had to do it very, very quickly, and they did it. And they did it with huge amount of hard work, working loads and loads of overtime, and with lots and lots of humour too. And I think the fact that all our services have managed to keep going, as well as doing all the extra COVID safe stuff that needed to be done, is just absolutely tremendous. And one of the most, I mean, it's been an awful time for everybody, and we know lots and lots of people have been very badly impacted by it. But one of the upsides of it has been seeing the huge, enormous community response that there has been, so that we know in most localities, people have been shopping, they've been collecting prescriptions, they've been delivering food, they've been running the food banks, they've been trying to keep everybody safe. Our retailers, you know, where we go and buy our food, they have been absolutely tremendous, haven't they, in keeping all of that going. And I think absolutely we owe a huge debt of thanks to all of those people, and it's something I will never ever forget. And I think in terms of recovery, it is absolutely certainly something that we need to build on and mustn't let go of. I think the whole meaning about, you know, public service, well, we've seen it for good and real, haven't we, during this last year? We've seen public service at its best. So thank you for bringing the motion, and I share in the thanks to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. It was no disrespect to you, Councillor Meredith, but I know you like to speak last. It's one of your fortes. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to pay tribute to two fractions of the healthcare of the National Health, which very rarely get a mention, but I feel that I must mention their names. They're not their names, but their organisations. The first one I want to say is about the ambulance drivers. The ambulance drivers are the first people who come to you when they're called. And on three occasions when we called the ambulance drivers, they was there within 10 minutes. And that was a wonderful thing for me to do, for them to do. And also the way they look after people before they take them to hospital. They're so dedicated. I sat and listened to them while they was giving me the treatment, and I was taken back by how well they was and what they've done. The second people I want to mention who never get a mention is the healthcare workers. They are the lowest paid in the health service. They get very little remuneration, but they do a tremendous amount of work. And I noticed most of them, the healthcare workers that was on the COVID ward that I was on, all come from Eastern Europe. But they was absolutely brilliant. They looked after everybody in that ward, and they was hands-on. Anything you wanted, they helped you with. And it was a marvelous thing to see. So I'm paying tribute to those two organisations, and I hope that people will recognise how valuable these two organisations are to the people that are suffering from COVID. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dennis. I don't expect there's any more speakers, is there?
Nobody appears to be indicating,
You've
Mr.
done
Mayor.
it again, Dennis. I need a vote on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Doesn't the leader have a right to reply?
I dare say. Do you want to reply, Jonathan?
Well, I'd only briefly say how fitting to finish on comments from Dennis, who I know has fought the most tremendous fight, and we're all extremely proud of what he's done and glad to see him now in what appears to me, on the screen at least, to be back to normal sort of strength. It has been a wonderful time, hasn't it? Whether it's the residents whose spirit has meant that they've fought back, or whether it's the public sector that fought so well, I think ultimately when the chips are down, there's nowhere I'd rather be than Northampton. And I know I've always felt that in the years I've been on the Borough Council, that the Borough Council is the strongest advocate for a wonderful Northampton as well. So thank you all for your supportive comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are we going to the vote then? I assume this is unanimous.
Agreed.
Wonderful, wonderful. We commend you, Dennis. We commend you, Dennis, for getting through your tribulations this year.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Matters of urgency. Now, I've only got one urgency, and I'm sure all former mayors at one time or another have had this. Never sit at home in central heating with your robes on. I feel like a Kentucky perishing fried chicken. Thank you. The meeting's closed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.